Yuri, welcome to the show.
God, I'm very excited to speak with you today.
It's awesome.
This is great.
It's great because I get to have another leadership expert, HR consultant. You've worked with some very, very big companies. We can talk leadership man to man here on the Tribesmen podcast. And the most important thing I think is, the title of your book, Be Your Own Commander in Chief. And in times of chaos, and we talk about clarity and meaning and impact and success. So I think you've come to the right place. And so I once again, thank you for being here and giving us your time to make this happen.
Thank you as well. Let's get to it.
So really quickly, Russia to the States, back to Haifa. Give us a minute synopsis of, what that was like, and then obviously becoming observant, and how that came about for you.
A minute is little, but let's see. So I was born in Moscow, grew up in Russia until I was 9. So in 92, we came to the US, where I grew up in Kentucky. We came exactly on the day that Clinton was elected. And, the streets were not paved with gold or anything like that, but clearly it was a very different and much better scenario. My mom worked at the University of Kentucky, so grew up, that's I'm a Kentucky boy, believe it or not. And then I went to college in Philly. After Philly, most people end up going to New York for, finance or becoming a doctor, a lawyer, and all of that. My designs were much smaller. I wanted to become a PhD of neuroscience because that's what my mom does. My father was a physicist. He passed away 30 years ago. So, after going through a bunch of different careers, 8 different careers, and a lot of very strange and bizarre experiences, and maybe because of them, part of that, starting with Chabad in college and kind of growing spiritually, I was always kind of drawn to things like that. I never had much in terms of resources. In college, it really took another level. And when I got to New York, it was kind of like, it's really a damn shame not to keep kosher or to keep Shabbat here because so many of my friends do. And it's kind of the right thing to do. It's not difficult. And eventually I met my wife at a Chabad. Our kids went to Chabad schools. We're not Chabad ourselves per se, but we're very sympathetic, as I think most people that have dealt with Chabad are. And then, about 3.5 years ago, we were just, trying to come to Israel for a wedding of my brother-in-law. And the only way to get in back in those times, because of COVID, was by doing all the paperwork for Aliyah. So we just said, you know what, we're sitting and working remotely in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and there's shootings here and there. And this is not really how we want to raise our kids. It's crazy expensive. If we're going to go to Israel, it's crazy expensive. It doesn't make a lot of sense on paper in some regards. It turned out to be wrong. It makes a lot more sense actually later. But basically, it was always our dream. We talked about it on our first date, and we just got it done. Thanks to my wife, she made the final push, and we made Aliyah in 2021, right with the rockets from Hamas.
Yeah. Hopefully you guys are safe, and it's getting a little bit more hectic at the moment with everything that's going on. So always praying for Israel.
Fireworks.
Fireworks.
Tonight we might have fireworks from Iran, from Lebanon, from Yemen, from Iraq, Syria. I'm probably missing a couple guys,
Listen, I think that
Chinese fireworks too.
Your book, in times of chaos, we're in it, and just really quickly, how'd you go from neuroscientist for wanting that into the business of people? It's what we do, right? It's we impact, we inspire people, build better teams. How did you go from neuroscientist to the business of people?
Yeah, so I always like to joke and preface, kids, don't try this at home, right? Whatever you do. Neuroscience, as I mentioned, my mom is a PhD in neuroscience, and I grew up with this stuff more than just like my mom talks about it a lot, or I go visit the lab. I worked in a lab maybe 5 summers. I also went into it, meaning, I was going to be a doctor and then practice something around science as well.
Like a good Jewish boy.
Like a good Jewish boy, like an immigrant, you need the grad degree. Otherwise, what are you doing twiddling your thumbs here, right?
Yeah.
So in college, it was like, I'm going to do pre-med, I'm going to do neuroscience, and okay, I might be able to play around with some humanities because that's also a great place for this stuff. So, I checked my boxes. I did pre-med, I did chemistry. I also gave myself more or less a course in film. I majored in anthropology as well. So I had this very interesting perspective on how humans function, both from kind of a physical anthropology perspective, meaning, we find these fossils and we postulate about which parts of the brain were working in, uh, Cro-Magnon versus something else. And I was always interested in human behavior. So that's one piece that was always there, regardless of what major. The other part was I always wanted to be a writer, and it was always like, get your medical degree, then you'll have your soul. No, the bad Jewish joke. You can be a writer after you practice medicine, and you'll have plenty of material, this typical Russian mentality. So, getting out of that, getting out of college, you're going to do grad school. I did 1 year of that, and it was just plenty clear that this is not for you. And the administrator of the program more or less said, "Hey, you know what? You're a nice guy. You're very smart. You don't belong here." So I went and worked in sales. I worked as a paralegal, and again, this kind of thing. Oh, you can't twiddle your thumbs. You can't go find yourself. You got to go and get that grad degree. Oh, and there's some guy that, Russian Jewish guy went to Columbia. So yeah, that sounds like a good idea, right? You like international affairs. Who makes decisions like this, right? In retrospect. So I did law school. What did I do in law school? Well, okay, I worked in insurance defense litigation. I worked for an ambulance chaser. I mean, speaking frankly, for a summer, he let me go to Israel and he used my logins for, Westlaw and LexisNexis. I saved him thousands of dollars. I was like, wow, what a nice guy. And then I got it later, right? So New York education.
Yeah.
Then graduating from law school 2009, there's not much for jobs. I can't seem to pass the bar for whatever reason. 4 times I took the damn thing. I'm supposed to be a smart guy, just missed it by a few points. Not meant to be a lawyer, right? And I graduate with $250,000 in law school debt, living in New York, just starting a family. And I'm just grabbing on for dear life. And I have no life skills. What the hell do I know about life? Neuroscience, law, right? What do I know? I've never worked any practical day job, maybe some paralegal stuff. I don't know anything. And I'm out into this world and it's rough. I mean, it's really rough. I'm trying to figure out how to get a job, how to formulate my resume, how to, think about a career. I don't really see myself doing this stuff, but I have to because it's my track record, it's my profession, that's what's on LinkedIn. So it started this really vicious, truly vicious cycle of, oh crap, I need revenue, right? Because I need to pay the rent, I need to, figure out how we're going to support our one kid and second, third, etc. And by the way, I hate this work because, what am I really focused on this whole time, right? I mean, this is what I realized much later when I hit one crisis, then another crisis, a third one. It's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't think I can, my wife isn't going to stay around for any more of this.
Yeah.
Right. So I've always loved people. I've always been interested in people. I've dissected human interaction from every which possible angle. Yes, how the brain works, what lights up in there, during this interaction or that change in nutrition or, this in conversation. That's what's lit me up always. And then anthropology, what does this look like in our, development from, I don't know, Neanderthal Cro-Magnon to modern Homo sapiens? And then what does that look like in literature? When I really enjoyed reading Proust and Thomas Mann and, these other incredible authors at 15, it sparked something. It said, wait a minute, the story element is everything. It truly is everything because later I learned from Kurt Vonnegut, for example, that you have really very few storylines in literature, right? He did this for his PhD. It's rags to riches, riches to rags. There's the princess in a castle. There's not really that many. So when you bring all this together, what do you realize? Okay, I'm not Shakespeare. I'm not Moliere. I'm not something like that. I don't need to be. Every generation needs a retelling of all the same stories of love, death, frustration, war, all of this kind of stuff, right? And that's the essential kind of human truth for me from that angle. I'm interested in humans, in their behavior, in their stories, what they bring, and then how I can help them if that's the case. And with that interaction, what can I give them in terms of maybe tools, perspective, something else to set them on a better path?
Love it.
That's
Love
what
it because I think we're like very, very connected on the same way. My wife always says you have a lot of faith in people. And I said, yeah, I love people. I love the interaction, the why, the how does it work? Why did you do that? Why did you say this? it's intriguing to me. And curiously, the first thing that I talk about in my leadership framework, which is the first thing that you talk about in the book, is clarity, right? I think that a lot of times with what's happening right now with the wars, anti-Semitism, the Jewish man, money, San Diego, where I live, is getting ridiculously expensive. Everywhere is getting crazy. The divorce rate's growing like insanity. Let's talk really quickly about clarity and how the men who are listening can get more clarity in their life. And when you get more clarity, what does that accomplish?
Sure. I mean, obviously, this is a very, very big subject, and I think it deserves a much bigger treatment than what I can give it. But let's try our best. I think that, chaos is in some ways a mask. It gets us thinking in very short, superficial steps about who we are and where we're going. It's about the next project, the next, revenue, the next job, the next interaction. It's crisis control, right? Crisis mode. So when you talk about clarity, I think we clearly, as Jewish men, we have a lot of wisdom that's readily available, right? I mean, it's not just about talking to your rabbi. It might be learning on your own, going to Chabad.org. I mean, there's so many different resources, but that's also part of the problem. When there's so many resources, you don't know where to start. So you might go after, what Tony Robbins is doing, but he's like, 30 years ahead and he's like a billionaire. Like, how does that really relate to me? Rah, 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 I'm inspired from his conference, but what does that do for me back at home? Right. And you essentially, what are we doing each day? We kind of go through news feeds, essentially, right? Everything is a news feed. Our email is a news feed, our Facebook, our LinkedIn. Everything is structured in that way, right? Then you have the TikTok thing, and we're even more sucked into it. So it's very hard to pull out of that, number one. We have Shabbat, which is huge. That's a massive, massive, you know, blessing. I mean, I don't know if any other way to put it, for us to specifically do that. We have to draw ourselves out of that, crazy chaos and everything is about the next step to why am I here? What is this for? Sure, maybe I've suffered and I've been misaligned and things are difficult, but you're starting to get towards something like, who am I? What's my worldview? Where do I belong? If something doesn't work in my life, what can I do to fix it? Right. So that starts going back toward things like first principles. You can ask 5 whys. There's so many different frameworks around this. Right. But essentially, what is my worldview? If you want to, I don't want to compare it to a tech stack because that's ridiculous. But in a way, what's in my mental stack? How do I see myself? What are my affiliations? And it's not just like, hey, I'm Jewish and I don't know, modern Orthodox is my stream and I live in, I don't know, northern New Jersey and I went to this Ivy League and I have a 2-car garage and I have 2 kids and I work at Google or whatever, right? Those are all affiliations, but which of them really matter in what order? So in a world like this where you're scared, first of all, it's just a fear. I don't want to stand out, so I'll put a cap. I don't want to, make people feel jealous. So I'm not going to say I work at Google, I work in tech, or I go to college in Harvard, right? Rather in Boston. You never say Harvard. Just go to school in Boston. So we start hiding, we start putting all these layers, all these klipot on top of ourselves. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Wasn't the point of life to take them off? Wasn't the point to become more free, more of yourself? Like, where did all that go? And in the last even handful of years, there's COVID, there's anti-Semitism, war, all this stuff. It's just like we're back in this, like, we're in the in the safety room all the time, right? Wait a minute, I have to cover my head. So clarity starts happening when you physically, literally take the time, you start digging and questioning your assumptions, but also you start organizing things on the right shelves in the right order. Not everything is formulaic. Of course, it's starts and stops, and you come across people that might awaken something in you, or you might come across people that you say, I will never in my life again deal with that kind of person, right? So saying no actually is in some ways the first step to this clarity. You start saying no, and you start saying no a hell of a lot, and you have to be very firmly convicted in that no. And eventually you take away all of these things that don't work for you, that don't awaken you, don't push you in the right direction. Then you can question, who am I? What am I? Where does this belong? What are my affiliations? How do I fill my day in a way that aligns me with my values? Is either
Does that
go towards or you want to be away.
does that physically look like, taking time off, being alone, sitting there, getting a notebook? What does that, I mean, what do you recommend to your clients to do? If I'm a busy guy, I own a business. I'm, in the morning, I'm helping with the kids and the lunches and backpacks. I get to work and then I'm working all day long. And then after work, I go home and there's dinner and then there's showering and kids and all that type of stuff, which is beautiful. And then on the weekends, there's, Shabbat, and then Sundays we go family time, whatever that is. Is it I need to go be alone for 3 days in the woods? Like what is it that you recommend for these men to do to take inventory about that stack that you're talking about?
Mhm. I don't know that there's any magic answer, but I will tell you this. The best that I found, and again, every person will have different things. If you're a tech billionaire, and yeah, you maybe can go take that ayahuasca trip somewhere, and maybe you'll come back with this, mind-blowing thing. But if you've got nothing to fill your life, maybe the ayahuasca is only going to make you feel like garbage, right?
Yeah.
So the point is that instead of trying to separate and run away and run away and run. It doesn't work. We know that, especially when you have kids, you have obligations, you have work. So instead of trying to follow a guru or trying to realign yourself whole cloth or remake yourself and everything is new and shiny, that doesn't work either. The best you can do is say, okay, sure, I have to be more present. And there's a lot of fluff around, yeah, be more present, kumbaya. Okay, the best thing you can do to be present is to be curious. That's one blessing I've always had. Maybe, and it's even too much. Sometimes it's like, how much of a blessing can you take? Everything is interesting. Every person is interesting. Every book has some kind of something. Every subject, whatever I come across, some quote on Facebook, right? What are you doing to collate that stuff? Not just to store it somewhere, but to do something with it. Okay, so the input, what do you do with the input? First of all, how can you widen your sensitivity to things? Because of the chaos, because of this approach, we close ourselves off to so many different things that happen constantly. And Hashem sends us signals all the time. Every single moment is a signal. And the signal could be you're floating away from your values or where you need to go, or this is good, keep going there. So that's one thing, right? You want to make sure that in every situation, whether it's making a decision or whether it's like, wait a minute, be present, like be with your kid. That's very tough, but you don't have a choice. That's the input part. And then the output is, okay, in every interaction I have, first of all, with other people, it's just, that's like the easiest thing to focus on. So with other people, when I meet someone new, okay, what can I maybe download from them? Maybe it's their smile, maybe it's their, I don't know, their aversion to something that you take for granted. Like, okay, what is this? What signal are you sending me, Christian, right? What do I need to learn from this? And just synthesize, take it and do something. And then the opposite side is, I met this person for a reason. What am I meant to give to them
Mm.
so that ideally their life is better, at least not worse? At least the Hippocratic Oath should apply. So it's input. What can I, how can I milk the moment for more? Even when the moment is, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I haven't had my coffee, the kid is yelling. What can I milk from that? Where's my curiosity? How can I take more from that moment so that I can maybe process it later or do something with it? And then with the output, what can I do to help this other person to send them further on their path to where they're supposed to go?
So it's a lot of, the word, tikkun comes in basically as we take inventory for us, we light the candle within, and then when we meet others, we pass the torch, we pass the candle, we light them up, and that gives us the clarity to know what is that I want. I always talk about when I'm sitting with clients, the first question I always ask, and it's crazy, Yuri, because they get very confused, and it's the easiest question. You probably do the same. It's, what do you want? And so many people don't sit there and just ask themselves, like, what do I want? Right. And I think that in Judaism, we're given this gift of, berachot every single day and gratitude as you wake up with modeh and all those types of things, to take a moment to say, this is what I want. What's the next step? Where do I go from here? I was working with a lady and very successful in business and real estate, and she didn't have to work a day in her life. And I just said, what do you want? And she looked at me, she goes, I have no clue. And as I look at my Jewish friends, the guys, and I ask, what do you want? The response I get the most, and this is what I want to talk to you about, is I want more peace. I want more calm. A lot of my friends talk about like, I want to get out of San Diego. I want to go live in the woods. I want to go live away from the community, right? There's this sense of wanting to rip away from everything to get peace, but are they actually going to have peace when they go there?
And I think we know the ultimate answer. Sometimes you have to get away because you're too pressured and you can't take enough time and inventory of yourself and where you're going and what you need and what you want, right? Without that separation. But the separation in itself is not a solution. It's very much just a band-aid. So what I found, I'm someone who, on the one hand, didn't grow up observant in the least because, coming from the Soviet Union, we knew we were Jewish. I mean, it was very clear. My grandfather was always making jokes in Yiddish, and everything was very, very strongly Jewish. My grandmother was always like, yeah, So we felt that very strongly, even though like my mom was always afraid. I mean, we lived in Brooklyn. She's like, please don't wear a kippah. I'm like, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm proud
Brooklyn.
of who I am. I'm not going back to that. And thankfully we live in Israel. We don't have to think about these things, short of like going to an Arab village.
Yeah.
So, the point is the separation is not enough, but it's also critical. And the separation, just in the way that Shabbat is separate from the rest of the week. One of the things I felt, but I didn't verbalize when living in Brooklyn was I need more nature. I
Mm.
mean, I grew up in nature, right? Outside of Moscow. And I remember the forest, like I remember like I'm there right now, and how important it was for my development, my wonder, my sense of curiosity, my, you know, uh, curiosity about little bugs or plants sprouting on, what in what season, what makes it grow, right? You have to have that. I mean, all of us are really overgrown children that maybe had to be forced into adulthood. I'm talking about especially in America. In America, like in Israel, okay, you serve in the army, like you get your schnitzel together much earlier because you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Everything is like always in your face. In the US, it's like, oh, kumbaya, yeah, college, oh, awesome, yeah, grad school, yeah, oh, first job, ooh, okay, now, now things get real after, oh, maybe I'll get a guarantor for my apartment, and eventually, like, no, there's no guarantor, there's nobody coming to save you, and it's like maybe you and your wife or whatever, and good luck, it's the two of you. So, with that mindset, you always need separation. You need to learn to be alone with yourself. Alone, not in fear, alone, not unsure of yourself, but alone working on yourself. There is no better person to work on yourself than yourself. Whether or not you have a coach or you have a consultant or whoever, they may help you to identify what to think about, not what to think, but what to think about or how to think about something. But you still have to do the hard work. You have to lead yourself out of that proverbial wilderness.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think that having a coach, I've gone to therapy and coaches, and you're right. It's asking the question to be able to spark that inner work that needs to happen to essentially get the clarity that we're talking about. Because without that clarity, you talk about having meaning and impact and success. It's hard to do that for your family, for your relationship, even your connection with God, if you don't have the time to just ask yourself questions of what am I thinking, what's going on, how am I okay? And I think that a lot of times we get around our community, and this is, I'm talking with myself, where they're in their own same stuff, and you ask yourselves very superficial questions, and there's no depth, there's no real work happening because it's, oh, how's business? How's the wife? When you gonna have a kid? What's going on? There's no real depth of conversation because I think
Aha.
you said we're all in the safe room. All of us are in the safe room, even when we're talking to each other. And so
Yep.
God forbid I open up that door a little bit to let you in, and you open it up to let me in.
Mhm.
As you're working with people, Yuri, and worked with massive companies. How important is that transparency, that vulnerability in opening up to be able to find that clarity in who you are?
Well, I mean, it's foundational, right? I mean, it's very simple. Actually, some of the people that I've had the greatest success with are the ones that find something in themselves, like, wait a minute, why am I stuck in life, right? I mean, okay, sure, I'm a woman working in a Fortune 500 company, and I kind of see the writing on the wall that, if I'm going to have a kid, then, things curtail. Okay, but you know what? I have something that's calling. I don't know what to call it. I don't know how to get it out of me, but I feel like there's something, anything could be better than this corporate job, for example, right? But they don't have the guide. They don't have they're looking for permission. There's always a permission. I need to, the guru has to say so, the boss has to say so, my papa, my mama, whoever, right? So it's very hard because, and I can speak as an American as well, right? We go through life in America, we're so obsessed with how things look, right? And maybe how they feel and whatever, right? So it's a very utilitarian view of things. That's not our fault. We know that there's a much greater depth, but we're always pulled to the surface by society because we're afraid, and there's no. So it's very hard not just to take the time, but to look around. We're all infected with this virus. We're infected with the virus of, you know, how does it look? Oh no, God forbid I say something wrong, right? And it's like, dude, chill out. There's much, much more serious things in life. And there's always someone who can't stand you because it's them, it's not you. Or there's someone that maybe looks up to you that may not never say it. So live your life, be the best version of yourself. And that's hard enough. Just focus on your own journey, figure out what you're here for, and go for it. Just, whatever difficulties you come across will help steer you in the right direction, right? Because we're taught in Judaism that nothing you encounter you cannot solve with what you have,
Mhm.
right? God doesn't put challenges in front of you that you can't tackle. So once we are, and again, this is the hard part. Yes, we have Shabbat, and of course we have, Rabbeim, and we have, lots of great books and traditions and all of that, but we're still mostly infected with this virus. If we're talking about not just in the US, in Galut in general. My wife is French. I've been in France a number of times, been in Morocco. I mean, I've been in a lot of places, Mexico. So you see, it's, again, I'm always curious about people and how they think and how they speak and all of this stuff. See a huge variety, but it's the same thing. In Galut, the way people think is always like, what is the prevailing wind? What is the prevailing view? Because we're humans and we have to live, and we're not like others, and we have to hide, and we have to, So when you live in Israel, I mean, it's a rude awakening because there's no filter, right?
Yeah.
People are fully themselves. They don't lower their voice. They don't care how they're dressed or how they come across. And it's like, you're the problem if you don't like this, you can't handle it. You're the
Yeah.
problem, buddy. So it's a jarring thing where you land in this place, and like the rules are completely different, and obviously the language, the bureaucracy, I mean, everything is different. So I'm just speaking very, very frankly. I grew
Yeah.
up as a mama's boy, right? With just literally my mom and my sister. And my father passed away early, and my parents divorced when I was 5. So for me, most of my life I've been trying to fill that void of, I don't have a father. And by the way, as a father, he was, X, Y, and Z and terrible. And I never want to be that way. So I
Yeah.
constructed myself as a man in direct contraposition to how my
Mm.
father was, or at least the way that, he was talked about. So with that, everything is curious, everything is sensitive, right? It's very tough to arrive in the real world. Like, crap, I got this massive debt. I got a family I got to support. How am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to pay this back? And like try to save something. I mean, it's hell, right? So, and then going through the experience of constant bombardment, like how am I going to handle this? I've never dealt with this. How do I deal with zero, zero in the account? I'm leaving grad school. I don't have a job yet. My friend is nice enough to pay for lunch, whatever. and repeated things like, I don't have the tools to deal with this. You know what? Okay, I went to the Rebbe's. Oh hell, I was going through some very deep troubles between grad school and grad school, and I'm like, please just show me, just help me. Like I'll start putting on tefillin. And literally since that day, I have never not put on tefillin when
Wow.
I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
Right? It's moments like that where it's like I have no bloody clue how to deal with this. This is a completely new thing. I have no support system. I can't rely on my mom. There's no dad. My sister is very like, tough love, whatever.
Just
What the
Russian.
hell do I do? Right? And going through that over and over and over. In Israel, it's like that's just every day for the first 2 years
Yeah.
plus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Figure it out, buddy, in Hebrew. But so
It's
that's the
amazing.
background of this whole story.
Yeah, no, and I think it's incredible because you've put yourself in kind of like your own chaos, right? Moving, family, all this type of stuff, and being able to work that out in yourself and to give yourself that success and the meaning. And now, like I said, you're working with big companies in the HR sector and consulting. It's very respectable and it's very admirable because a lot of people would just keep going down that rabbit hole, adding more masks, putting more layers on the safe room to not get out. Let's talk about this. I want to talk about the book has 4 volumes, and I think this adds on to exactly what we're talking about, and I don't remember them exactly, but like volume 1 was like, physical sleep, nutrition, health. Tell us the 4 volumes and then how that interacts with each other to be able to have the success with yourself, to be able to lead. And I also think to be able to wake up every day in these times that we're having with a smile and to be able to enjoy because that's the gift that we've been given by Hashem, by God.
No small thing. Yeah. So the genesis of the book was in just I went through all these things and here's what I've collected and I need to do something with this. And in the beginning, I was just writing a book about the third one, which is conversations with other people. Because I'm a coach, I'm an HR guy, and that's what I do. I do all day as I speak to people and I try to,
Yeah.
direct them in the right direction. So the foundation of all this and the background for this is that my mom again is a PhD in neuroscience, and she's always been really on the front lines of nutrition and all these health elements from the scientific perspective, meaning the molecules are doing this and the cells are doing that. And so, the foundation for all of this, and this is all based on Maslow's hierarchy, right? I mean, it's the basic stuff, but it's a lot more elaborate because over time you see how the other pieces fit. So the foundation is your conversation. Again, language and psychology are two sides of the same coin. For me, that's been the viral vector for me to change my behavior. And I noticed after coaching a number of people that that's the same thing for them, right? You change your language and you change the way you think, it actually changes the way you frame problems, the way you make decisions, and the way you go about your daily life. So something very powerful in that. And also language is already at a pretty good level for even the average Joe, because just to get around, to understand what's going on, to make sense of it, and to express oneself. So the foundation is health, fitness, nutrition, sleep, prevention. I
Mm.
mean, it's, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, how do you converse with your body? How do you detect what your body is telling you? How do you test your diet, for example? Because that's one of the major, if not probably the major factor in our health. So, how do we eat? How does our body react to that? And if it reacts badly, maybe we cut that out or we adjust for what we eat or don't. Sleep, very foundational. Most people screw it up. Maybe, you need a mask, you need to draw down the shades, you need to, keep the phone out of the bedroom for at least 3-4 hours before bed, things like that, right? So the second level, this is in some ways the most interesting and the hardest part. It's our mental models and life skills. What is our conversation up here? What is in our mental stack? Okay, what is our worldview? Meaning literally we take this massive jumble that's chaotic and always changing that is called the world, and how do we make sense of it? How do we process information? How do we make decisions? Okay, imagine that the world is like, we live in a giant house. The brain is a massive house with hundreds of rooms, probably a lot more. Okay, and we grow up as kids and we have all of these incredible rooms that we can go to and we can play and we can experiment. And with time, we just narrow our, living quarters. We just live in one or two. Maybe we store something in a third. And we store and store and store. We can't see. We can't see through the windows. It's just junk. It's a bunch of junk. And we don't take the time to clear the view. Hey, what's in the yard over there? Right? We don't do this. Shabbat helps, but again, we're right back after a day. So with those hundreds of rooms, what do we do? Who am I, right? Oh, recency bias or 150 kinds of bias that we have against ourselves. And we mostly don't realize what these things are. If you study behavioral economics, which again, I didn't get so much into, Kahneman or Pink or Ariely, et cetera, until later, ironically, after writing the book, and which was good. I'm glad I did that, paradoxically, because I took things out in my own way to make sense of them for myself before putting labels on them. So with those rooms, how do you identify that you process information incorrectly due to all these different biases? Once you're aware of those biases, you can say, you know what, I can flip this, or maybe I'm not going to look at the most, the primacy, the first one, or the recency, the most recent one. I'm going to take my time really to process what's going on. You know what, if I'm really afraid of what's in that dark corner, is that because I'm afraid of snakes or because I had some episode with being stuck in the dark when I was a kid?
Yeah.
And you turn this inside out, you clean it, you turn it in, it's hard work. Nobody wants to unpack. Everyone wants to leave the crap in the corner. Third one is other people. So that's, how do you think about other people? What do they want? More importantly, what are their incentives? This is one thing that, from an HR perspective, almost all companies really screw up. They don't understand people's incentives. This is not my idea. There's an idea out there of a chief incentives officer. Okay. And this idea is essentially about, okay, who looks at each department, each role, understands what the person wants, maybe next step in their career, maybe higher pay, maybe more interesting project, and really do their best to assign them to that position, right? And provide the right financial, social, and other incentives for them to do their life's best work in the here and now, not somewhere else. Things like that. Oh yeah, and parents and spouse and kids, what do they need? What are they looking for? Most people never have this thought. They're just like, why don't you get me? Why don't you understand that? And I'm guilty of that just as much.
Yeah.
Right. So when we're in our lower brain, we're just defaulting to go, come on, just get it. Come on, let's go. Right. You have to get out of there, go higher, So listening, as opposed, like we're supposed to, listen twice as much as we speak, because 2 years and all that, much harder to put in practice than
For
it
sure.
sounds. Then the last conversation is with Hashem, right? So it's asking questions like, who am I? Why am I here? Why have I had to go through all of those traumatic experiences? What is this all for? And yeah, I mean, maybe some hints of what is the meaning of life. And, we talked about this input and output. So if Hashem put me through all these experiences and maybe, I found them traumatic, but because I was not equipped to deal with them, maybe I can reframe them and I can go back and reverse engineer what I went through and understand what it was for, so I can heal myself. So I put myself back in that situation and realize, okay, you were a kid, you were totally innocent, you were exposed to this terrible thing, and what the hell were you supposed to do? Forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And then the opposite, okay, now that I'm a grown-ass man, now that I have been through all these things, and maybe I have a tiny bit of wisdom to give to the next generation, or at least someone who hasn't been through this, it's not just a nice thing to do, it's my responsibility. It doesn't need to be a heavy thing. It's like, I have my vessel, I have my kli, and Hashem has, made me, broken me, made me, broken, made, remade, etc. And I'm here. The best I can do is try to keep my vessel whole, but even if it leaks, right? You have the Leonard Cohen quote for that. When it's broken, the light gets it. So with all that, you have this almost like a hike up a mountain. This Maslow's hierarchy is like a mountain, and you have these 4 conversations. When you get to the top, you don't reach some kind of nirvana, but you do get a much better view of yourself. Where am I holding? Okay. And when you detect up that journey, in that journey up that mountain, when you detect, hey, you know what? This is off. My time management is off. Or you know what? I don't feel like I'm learning enough. How do I zoom back into that subject matter, reform, redo, rethink, restructure, put different systems, habits, whatever, and I'm back on my feet with a better vessel. Now I can go with that perspective, with that regular travel up and down the mountain every day, not because of Yom Kippur, not because of trauma, because you're forced into it. You're doing it proactively as a
Yeah.
habit and you're loving it. And maybe you're helping others, maybe you're coaching them or whatever it is. That's where the magic happens.
I love that. And one like an image that comes to mind is you talk about the vessel that we are this vessel. I think a lot of times people are afraid just to open the top and look inside. Right. And that's where a lot of we've talked about on this podcast, a lot of addictions happen in drinking and drugs and porn, all that type of stuff. Let's just look inside and it is what it is. It's beautiful as it is. And how do we improve? How do we just make it better and not look at it and with eyes of judgment? Because if it was what I've learned in Jewish school and from the rabbis that teach me, God doesn't look at us with judgment. He looks at us with love. He just
Yeah.
wants us to become better. And if we look at ourselves that way, then we can really fix or better the vessel. Because as you said, mine's been broken, super glued, taped, scotch taped back together for
Yeah.
sure. But I want to keep looking at it every single day, opening it up and saying, how can I become the best me, the best father, the best husband, the best community member that I can be?
Yeah. So that's how it is basically, right? When you have a chance, again, my story is just one story, but there are elements of my story that I see in all these other stories. And
Yeah.
over time, actually, funny enough, I'm sure you've seen this as well. Law of attraction, right? When you're very strong in your signal and you've said no so many times that you're stronger in yourself, if, you're just, this is bad for you, and you just say, no, I will not spend my time that way. I will not spend my money that way. I refuse to go back into that hole where I remember that was my Hanoi Hilton, if you will, right? So I will not do that. And you get stronger in your convictions, or even your posture changes, the way you inflect your voice changes, and you say, you know what? Okay, I value my time more,
Mm.
right? I don't need to use all of those words anymore. I can be quieter, but I can have a greater impact with fewer words. And that's that kind of going back to yourself that really starts you on that journey. And it's very imperfect, it's very chaotic, it's very, very much up and down. But if you're not struggling, you're probably shrinking backwards. That's the
Mm.
truth.
We're ending right there. If you're not struggling, you're shrinking backwards. I love that because growth is work. Growth is a struggle. Growth takes time. It breaks you. It makes you. It's messy. It's very, very messy. Yuri, this has been an epic episode. I appreciate you being on here. And as we say to everybody who comes on, may you have strength and courage. Chazak ve'ematz. And thank you so much for doing what you do. My belief, my personal mission is to build a legion of leaders so that my daughters grow up in a better world. And you doing the work that you do, you're helping me on my mission and doing your own. So I appreciate you for that, brother.
You guys, thank you so much. Wonderful conversation. It's not had enough. There are many different versions of this. So I appreciate that
I'm
you're
sure we'll do this again somehow, some way.
with great pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Gentlemen, stay tuned for the next episode of the Tribesmen podcast.